Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Wycliffe Wanjala. I am a teacher sometimes, but I'm a storyteller full time. Every time I tell a story, and the stories I tell, I would want to be listened to. You too should tell stories sometimes because stories connect abstract ideas to the real life that we live in. Now, have you ever told a story and found out that someone is clearly not interested in the story that you're telling? I took some time to think about the things that would make one a bad storyteller. I know that when you go to the internet, Google, ChatGPT, you go to YouTube, you will get a lot of information concerning who a good storyteller is. Now, allow me to tell you on the flip side, who is a bad storyteller? Now, sometimes when we tell stories, we miss out on some things that could make people to potentially lose interest in our stories. And one of the things that personally I lose interest in stories for is telling a story that is repeated so many times by the same storyteller. You see, if I tell you a story about my grandmother, for instance, I should remember that I have told you this story because tomorrow when I start telling you the same story, you will block me off. You're going to listen, but you are listening out of respect, out of politeness. You're just listening. But if I tell you a story that I have never told you, you are curious because you want to know what I am teaching you about this story. I have had times when people have told me stories that they told me before. Sometimes I listen, I laugh at the funny parts of those stories, and I pretend as though I'm hearing the stories for the first time. But other times I become blatant and I tell them that, hey, is that the story about the old woman who fell off the bridge? So I complete the story for you at the beginning to make you realize that, hey, I told this story to him. The second group of people are the people that tell stories with too many details. We are interested in nice trees that have been cut and we can use to construct a story, and you give us a forest. You tell us a story about a journey that you took with your friend to the United States of America, and you start by saying, one time my friend and I, my friend Omolo, he's called Omolo and his sister in fact is called Margaret, and they come from Naivasha, Kenya. We were traveling to the United States. His uncle had invited him. So what we did is we went to the embassy, we got the visas, and we bought the ticket. In fact, that time the ticket was 110,000 Kenya shillings. And we woke up very early. We took a Bolt, Uber. We got to the airport at 8 a.m. and the flight was at noon. That's your story. Now I am still at your who was the friend again? Omolo, Opondo, or whatever the name. All these details are not necessary to me because one, I don't know Omolo, I don't know Omolo's uncle, I'm not interested in Margaret. And surely it doesn't affect my life today if you go to the airport at 5 minutes to the flight takeoff, unless that is related to your story. You see, filter out all this other information that is excess in your story and tell what is only useful to me. Don't tell me about how you went through 7 bumps on the road before you took a turn. That doesn't help me, does it? The other person is the person who tells a story and wants you to experience the story the way they experience it. These are the people that will pinch you where they feel the story touches them more. They're like, "If the man was very funny," and they pinch you. I have such people in my life, and I feel it's quite inappropriate to be touchy when you're telling stories, especially if you're just telling a story to one person, because we all experience stories differently. Sometimes you're telling a story and you feel that someone was being silly in your story and you slap your audience. You're like, some people are very funny. I don't think that's appropriate because I want to concentrate to the story, and sometimes I will actually laugh at the end. I will collect all the funny moments in your story and laugh at the end. So don't force me to laugh where you feel your story is funny. Tell your story in a manner that is clearly easy to follow, and then I will be able to follow what you are telling. The other group of people are the people who tell stories that clearly have no direction. You see, you're telling a story and I can't quite follow. You're like, one time we were in a certain home and something had been lost. So everyone was there and I was also among them. So what happened is that from a certain time, we were all there and we were looking for this thing and we could not find it. It was such a terrible time. I'm like, why are you wasting my time? What home was it? What had been lost? Who are we? We were all there. What time? You're telling a story that leaves me in a void. I'm like, what is this person talking about? So don't tell a story of that kind. Get some details of what you want to tell people, and because when you have details attached to what you're telling people, you appear more truthful than when you have vague sketches of what happened. It sounds like you just had something and you're just transferring it. So ensure that when you're telling a story, you can create characters. One thing about literature and storytelling is that you can be creative about names. You don't necessarily have to use real names. In fact, it is highly encouraged that you tell a story with names that are not real in order to preserve the dignity of the people in case the characters in your story have bad behavior. A character is promiscuous, a character is a prostitute, but you don't say my auntie is a prostitute. You can say there is a woman called Elena. She was a prostitute. And Elena was a prostitute to the extent that she contracted HIV and AIDS and died. Now you don't start saying my auntie Elena was a prostitute. Elena's children are your cousins and they will hear you and it's going to bring a rift between you and your cousins. Elena, for the record, Elena is not a real human being. I'm just, it's, of course, there are people called Elena, but I don't have a certain Elena in my life that I'm referring to. And the last group of people are the people that tell stories that information is unreal. It's clearly unreal. You can actually tell. You can tell that it's not true. For example, you're telling me a story of an aeroplane that crashed, and then you're giving me the details of what the pilot said to the co-pilot before they crashed. So you're saying that when they were flying, you know what happened is that the pilot, they encountered turbulence. And the pilot told the co-pilot that, we are going to just finish the turbulence after 5 minutes. And the co-pilot said, no, it's going to be 7 minutes. And you have the details. You even have 7 minutes, 5 minutes, and the plane crash happened and everybody died. Where were you? How did you get this information? So it's clear that you're lying to me. And it doesn't happen to only such extreme scenarios that the plane was up there and you're not. But you can tell a story. For example, somebody told me one time about a colleague I worked with. There's a woman who told me that you see that young man. That young man is he's so funny. He behaves like a woman. He even carries tissue paper when he's going for a short call. And I was like, wow, so you've been following this man to the washroom to check whether it's a short call or a long call. How do you tell that he has actually gone for a short call this time? Of course, you can see that he has carried tissue paper, no problem. And that is not a problem. But then if you tell me that he goes for a short call this time, long call this other time, aren't you just being malicious? So, storytelling requires that first, tell stories that are believable. Your characters need to have something that we call verisimilitude, believability. A character that feels pain, a character that grows up in normal time, a character that can die. Don't give me a story of a character that was hung on electric lines for a night and was still there the next day. No, if you hang your character on the electric post, at least make them be electrocuted. That's a normal thing that happens. If you have a character that you tell a story of a character for 100 years, kill the character and continue the story in the son and grandson of that story. So I would like us to learn to tell stories better, and we don't tell just vague narrations. We speak to ourselves and we think that we are talking to people. Thank you. Glad you were listening to me. This is not structured. I did not plan this, but I was listening. I was learning how to tell stories. But then I thought, What kind of stories don't I like? What kind of stories don't I pay attention to? I have very many people that I follow. I like how they tell their stories, and I want to tell stories in the same way too. But there are people that have told me stories and they have taught me the things that I've just shared with you. I hope that from what I've said, and if you notice that sometimes when you tell stories, people don't listen, that you will tell your stories in a better way next time. Happy storytelling, happy public speaking.